The Gauteng government will decide what to do with e-tolls after agreeing with the National Treasury proposal to cover 70% of the 47 billion rand debt roads agency Sanral incurred as a result of the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Project. Now, tabling his medium-term budget policy statement yesterday, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana said to help settle its e-toll debt, Sanral would receive 23.7 billion rand. For more on the story, we're now joined by Lesego, Makhubele, ANC Provincial Spokesperson, as well as Outa's Duvenage to talk to us about this. In studio, perhaps let me start with you, Lesego. Very good morning. Thank you so much for your time. Wayne, also greetings to you, as we'll come to you in just a moment. Motorists have crippled the e-toll system by refusing to pay. Government has now perhaps passed the e-toll hot potato to the Gauteng government. I mean, you know, in terms of reaction, the people of Gauteng are no longer bearing the brunt. I mean, it's a huge relief to the people of Gauteng. And what does it mean for the province?
Well, we are a listening and caring organization. We build a democracy based on the will of the people. And the people came out and cried about the cost of these e-tolls. Of course, many of Gauteng motorists and those who use the highways from other provinces were happy with the improvement of the highway. We must never forget that before the highways were improved, there was a lot of congestion on our route. There was a lot of there was a lot of traffic on the roads, and therefore we had to improve them at a cost. The challenge was that there was no consultative processes that took place in order to be able to source out from the people how these road improvements had to be dealt with. So we resolved one problem by creating another and made the people of Gauteng to actually carry the cost of it, and that was wrong. Any revolutionary movement which is founded on the pillars of true democratic ideals has to listen when the people speak. Civil society spoke to us, different groupings spoke to us, the people of Gauteng spoke to us, who actually had to experience a high cost of living because many of the commodities, goods and services go through these highways, and because these companies had to pay for passing through these countries, now they had to now increase the price of their goods and their services, which had to be borne by the people of Gauteng. So it's a big victory. It comes at the revolutionary birthday of O.R. Tambo. It comes at a time when we have saved the people of Ekurhuleni from the desecration of his grave by the ousted DA mayor. So we're happy as the ANC.
Very well. Wayne, you've been pushing for cancellation for several years now. Was, this inevitable? I mean, the fights have been intense and the lobbying has also been massive.
Absolutely. It was inevitable, but we wished that the ruling party was, as they say, a caring and listening party consistently, because at the time, I met personally with Nomvula Mokonyane, who was the Premier at the time, with Gwede Mantashe and the Ministerial Advisory Committee to spell out our research that this scheme would fail. And we never set out initially on the civil disobedience campaign that it needed, because all irrational laws need to be treated with the utmost disrespect that they have been introduced. And we set out on this project with the same strategy as was told to us by Gilbert Marcus, our senior counsel, that they apply to the Group Areas Act. Very irrational laws need to be treated one by one, and we set out to defend every person that was summoned. So, it was never going to work, and it wasn't even about the cost. The cost came in as a result of very, very high administration costs. The scheme was born in sin. The e-toll contract was told to us by Sanral that it was won at 6.4 billion rand for 5 years, and we found out the contract was signed at 9.8 billion. So there was a lot of unanswered questions. And not to mention the fact that it relies on an efficient postal service. We know our post office is in ruins. It relies on an efficient NATIS system. We know that NATIS is inaccurate, and there's no enforcement process. So this was a scheme that was always going to fail, but it needed a coordinated civil society approach to tell the public, stand your ground, do not pay these bills, and eventually government has to listen and reverse this decision. It took 10 years, but here we are, and we hope that this government is now learning that it cannot introduce laws of this nature without the meaningful consultation with the people and with the will of the people. If they're going to do this again, and by the way, it's happening right now with R2, and the Minister and the Premier of Gauteng need to take note of this, because the Premier of Gauteng and other provinces, other than I think the Western Cape, is opposed to R2. That's another scheme that's going to fail, but they are not listening again, and there's going to have to be another lesson taught by civil society. So I'm begging the spokesperson to speak to the Premier Lesego, because there's another big issue coming their way.
Yeah, resolving one problem to create another. That you and I were talking about that just now. R2, that is also something that could potentially explode, as Wayne says. But in terms of e-tolls, and I would like to get response on R2, but in terms of e-tolls, there still needs to be a consultation process, because there's a 30% chunk that Premier Panyaza Lesupi was speaking to yesterday, saying that a consultation process will need to happen. How is that process going to run?
The beauty and the burden of democracy is that there must be robust engagement between government, civil society, and organized groups. And that's what happened, where government says we are proposing this, and the people saying no, we are not agreeing. And that's what democracy is founded upon, those ideals. And government giving it always has to happen. Government must subject itself to the will of the people, not only through the ballot, but when the people speak in their numbers, government must listen. The ANC, it was the ANC Gauteng Provincial Conference resolution. Before many other people spoke on the matter, the ANC in Gauteng rejected how the model was done. The ANC then had to go and lobby national. Remember, we are not the federal state, where Gauteng can have its own laws. Mpumalanga can have its own laws and do things differently. We are a unitary government. So whatever is decided by national government is bound to everybody. But there has been an internal, intense, robust battle within the ANC. And I don't think we need to suffer from selective amnesia, where you had the former Premier of Gauteng, Comrade David Makhubele, who had a fight, an open fight. It went out from our meetings, and you had Premier Makhubele fighting directly with the then Minister of Finance, Tito Mboweni, telling him where to get off, because Tito at the time said that the model was there to stay, the toll gate was there to stay, but branches of the ANC in Gauteng refused and said we ought to listen to our people. We are the ones who are carrying the burden of being able to pay for this. So that's where we are. On the issue of the 30%, we are not going to commit the same mistake. We are not going to also allow national government to commit the same mistake. We must consult. We must have a conversation with the people of Gauteng. They need to be able to tell us, how are we going to do this? How are we going to refinance this if we have to? Remember, I had to start from the genesis. Outa knows that there was carnage on our road infrastructure, especially where the e-tolls are. When apartheid spatial planning was done, they only believed that only whites will have cars to drive on the highway. They only believe that only trucks that are owned by Afrikaner and white companies will only drive on the highways. They plan according to how apartheid was. They never planned and built big highways that will accommodate the demographics of this country. We came in, we opened the highways. They were very small. It was very difficult to drive from Pretoria or Tshwane to come to Johannesburg. It took you almost 2 hours before we actually extended the roads. And not only did we extend the highways, and we need to then not suffer from this selective amnesia. We also expanded what we call the back roads of Gauteng. We expanded the back roads of Gauteng, what was called if you are not using the highway from Pretoria to Johannesburg, you are using the old Johannesburg road. You can go and look at how much we have spent in expanding it.
That and get Wayne in before, just for the sake of time. Wayne, 30% shortfall. It needs to be funded. They're saying that a consultation process will take place. What is your reaction to that? Also, just listening into what Lesego is saying.
Well, we need clarity on what it is, what 30% of what. Is this of the outstanding bonds? Because we know that Sanral has received 22 billion rand from National Treasury over the last 10 years for this Gauteng Freeway project. So we need to understand what is 30% of what. It's not certainly not the 47 billion rand. Of the outstanding GFIP bonds, and people are talking about the entire Sanral bonds. It's really a lot of clarity that is required, so we look forward to getting that. But I just want to remind the spokesperson, the ANC, the selective amnesia sits with the fact that David Makhubele came into power in 2014, and the scheme was already launched. Nomvula Mokonyane, this is the premier at the time, she endorsed it, she supported it. The ANC was for the ETOL scheme. So they cannot just ignore this and then as the people became angry with the government about it, now suddenly flip over and say, oh, now we're opposed to it. So really, the issue here is that government needs to listen to its people and to be genuine about its public engagement, so not just use issues like this as a political football, because that's what's happening here. The ANC is claiming victory, and it's not their victory. This is the people's victory. It's not a political victory. The politics about this was that the ANC supported it. They drove it for 5 years, from 2008 when the decision was made, right up until 2014 when Premier Makhubele came on board. And even then, he had an advisory panel that showed him it was wrong, and he stayed with the scheme. He didn't expel it. He didn't fight hard enough. So here we are today, not as a result of the ANC, as a result of the people saying, we refuse to pay for an irrational scheme. Come and fetch us. Come and take us to jail. We will not pay. This is a civil society win, not an ANC win.
Mm-hmm. So now that e-tolls have been scrapped, what will happen to the infrastructure?
We'll have to repurpose it. The position of the African National Congress is that it's an investment, an infrastructural investment. The new premier has announced plans to actually ensure that there's facial recognition technologies in all the entry points of Gauteng and around the key areas in Gauteng. And we believe that a lot of cars are going through the highways, and including stolen vehicles, hijacked vehicles, criminal syndicates that are wanted by law enforcement agencies. And we believe that we have to use those countries to actually ensure that we monitor movement, we police, and we are able to know who's traveling up and down. I want to go back to what Outa is saying. Yes. We are not going to forget apartheid spatial building, where we come from, how the highways looks like, what happened when the economy opened up, and those that apartheid believe will never own cars and travel to from between Johannesburg and other provinces, which actually compelled us to then be able to expand the highways. David Makhubele was a provincial secretary of the ANC, a custodian of resolutions of the ANC. Mm-hmm. When he was elected premier of Gauteng, he was still provincial secretary of the ANC. What did he do? He carried with him resolutions of the ANC conference and implemented them in government to say that the ruling party, which won elections decisively, says it's against the e-tolls. It agrees with the people. It agrees with Outa. It agrees with everybody. Of course, the circumstances that necessitated for us to then expand the highways were beyond our control. The bone of contention here is the financial model in refinancing the expansion of the highway, because it has to be paid. It has to come from somewhere. What we should have rather done was to enter into a consultative process. Like all laws, we are going to even encourage civil society, people of Gauteng, don't wait for a law to be passed. Participate. Don't be passive in the policy formulation and formulation of laws, and then only participate when it is passed, when you now realize the implications of this law. And that's what happens with many of the laws. We passed now in Gauteng the Gauteng Economic Bill. At least we're able to galvanize many of our people to participate in that. So we are saying, let's participate in the formulation of the laws of this country, not at the tail end. From the stage from all the stages of the formulations of the law, so that we are then able to inform the entire product of the law, so that people feel that they are part and parcel of the law and their views are reflected in the final product of the law.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there for now, and thank you for your time, Lesego Makhubele, ANC Provincial Spokesperson, as well as Outa's Wayne Duvenage. Thank you for your time. Unfortunately, we've run out of time.